U.S. economy about $1.5 trillion between 2019 and 2028. Right? And this is research that was distributed by McKinsey and Company. And what they've also noted too was that business equity is the second largest source of wealth, second only to home ownership. So we think, it's extremely important as we move forward. And then also, if you look at, minority women, underrepresented women own businesses, if they were at parity with white women owned businesses, they would be able to generate 4 million new jobs and almost $1 trillion in revenues. Again, these are opportunities that our economy can absolutely take advantage of as we move forward. So again, this is important because this is really an economic imperative. And I've highlighted some organizations that have basically said, hey, this is something that we need to do to ensure that our economy is competitive, not just for today, but for years and generations to come. So where does DivInc come into play? So our vision is to essentially live in a world that's authentically diverse, equitable, and inclusive, a world where social and economic disparities no longer exist. And that is our grand vision. And let's go to the next slide, slide 7. Let's skip a couple of slides there. And so our mission in life is that we want to essentially bridge the gap between underrepresented entrepreneurs and the resources that they need to build profitable, high growth companies, build business equity as they move forward. And as we evolve, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but as we evolve into an ecosystem builder, not only do we want underrepresented entrepreneurs to be successful, but we also want to see more underrepresented folks as mentors, as advisors, and as investors within the community. Next slide. So our strategies for moving forward, we mobilize programs and partnerships that demonstrate diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture. And what do we mean by that is that we want this to be inclusive. We want folks to feel like they belong, that they can be in the place and really thrive and exceed as long as they're given the opportunities and access to the resources that they need to be successful. And those resources include, access to corporations, mentors, subject matter experts, education, and then the various different capital, social, human, and financial capital. Next slide. So DivInc has evolved. We started off in 2016 with an accelerator program specifically focused on underrepresented founders who were trying to essentially launch their startup innovation companies. And so as we've evolved over the last 4 years, we've become an ecosystem builder, transforming the ecosystem, entrepreneurial ecosystems by making them more inclusive and creating greater access for the underrepresented communities. And so some of the programs that we've added over the years, we started with our accelerator program, which is a 3-month intensive program that runs twice a year with about 10 entrepreneurs per accelerator. We also added an alumni program where we recognize the fact that we need to continue to support our founders throughout their journey. And so after they graduate from that program, we continue to give them formal support and more customized support so they can grow to be successful founders and grow high growth businesses. And then we also created Startup Sisters, which is a Women of Color initiative, Women of Color Entrepreneur Initiative, supporting our sisters who are by a matter of fact, the fastest growing segments of entrepreneurship in the United States. And so we need to bring more support and be able to give them greater access to the resources so they too can be highly successful. And then we also have a couple other programs of Champions of Change Awards, which is really a community-focused event celebrating DEI agents of change within the communities that we serve. And next slide. And so here's, we talk about transforming the tech ecosystem. You can look on this slide, this picture, and I can guarantee you will see yourself in here, right? And that's important, right? You can see yourself. You can know that there's a place for you. You can know that this is a culture where you can come in and be yourself and really be given the resources and the culture and the environment to allow you to really grow and thrive. Next slide. So you look at our programs over the years very quickly. Just wanted to share. We've had 5 cohorts, accelerator cohort programs over the last 4 years, and essentially you can see, how our demographic mix has been for the cohorts, and then you also look at the gender mix as well, and you can see that obviously very, very inclusive environment. And then in terms of what happens to the companies that go through DivInc. So many of our companies continue to grow, and they've moved on to become participants in other accelerator programs. Some have gone on to raise money, and I just got word just yesterday, as a matter of fact, that one of our companies from our second cohort has secured a $10 million Series A round, which is awesome. And so we do have some success stories, but of course, we have seen some that have not necessarily gone on, but even though they've closed their doors, they have gone on to leadership positions within various different companies in the community. Some have gone on to Facebook. Some of them have gone on to lead nonprofits. Some of them have gone on to be social entrepreneurs. And some of them have just merged with other entrepreneurs to start a new venture. So really excited about that. And now we have our next cohort, which is, we're in week 4 of the current cohort, number 6. Let's go to that next slide. And so cohort number 6, we're really excited. We have 11 companies in the program. And you can see what the mix is here. 33% African-American, 25% Latinx, 8% Asian, 33% white. And I know some people are like, well, wait a minute. Like, well, yes, these are women, and they're white women, and we support women, people of color, and underrepresented founders. Okay, and you can see the gender demographics. Obviously, the women are jamming in this particular cohort, so we're very proud of that. All right, here's our team. Very quickly, just look around the team. I will tell you guys that this is an awesome team, and I'm not saying that just because I am the CEO, but these are the most passionate, knowledgeable, well-connected team that are really all about, making our innovation ecosystem inclusive. And so I welcome you to reach out to us and continue to make things happen. All right, so just a couple of quick pictures of, in terms of getting the idea of what our, cohort, programming is all about, as we move forward. And then I saw a couple of comments, here, we want to be able to support the broader demographic. We want to see more Latinx. We want to see more of that inclusive environment to really broaden the entire ecosystem. Because the more diversity we have, the more innovation we'll have, and the more success that we'll have. So we want to continue to constantly grow. Okay, and this was one of the last picture here, and you guys have already met Joy Hutton, and Joy is based out of Houston. And why do we have somebody from Houston already on here? Well, DivInc, based in Austin, over the last 4 years, we are now venturing into Houston. And so Houston will be one of our new cities that we are going to expand to in 2020. So, and we're in the process of kicking that off. And this is really our reintroduction into Houston to get things moving after the start of COVID. So yes, H-Town, let's go. All right, so that said, I'm done talking about DivInc. I just want to give you guys some insight. And what I want to do, we talked about H-Town, right? So H-Town Innovation Ecosystem, we got some major players here tonight. But the one that I really want to start off is my man, Mike T. Brown. So for those of you who may not know Mike, Mike has a fantastic story, and we're going to try to get into some of that story as much as possible. But Mike and I met back in February. I had heard about him from other people prior to, and really just kind of hit it off. He is the founder of WinWin, and just to really kind of share his background, I've shared some logos on the screen about where he's been. So Duke University undergrad. He actually, I'm going to say this softly, he pledged Omega Psi Phi there. But he's a Q, and and he's also a NCAA football player, two-time All-American in football. Played in the NFL for 4 years. Came out of there, and he was self-taught, taught himself how to code. Just a self-motivated individual. Got himself into Draper University, which is like the premier entrepreneurship startup founder program in the nation, or maybe in the world. And he finished #1 in that Draper University. So, this is a bad boy we're talking about. And then later, after, he's done some, other businesses prior to WinWin, but took WinWin into 500 startups and really just kind of took off from there. So it's with great pleasure to be able to welcome Mike T. Brown as our guest for the Fireside Chat tonight. So Mike, welcome.
Thank you so much, Preston. I appreciate it. I want to just shout out DivInc for having me tonight. I'm excited. I heard it was a happy hour, so I got a little beverage. I'm ready to talk shop, and shout out to everybody that's tuned in right now, taking the time during the COVID craziness to come get some game. I think it's really important as you talk about minorities in tech and folks that are underrepresented, or what I like to refer to as one of my investors, Arlen Hamilton, says, underestimated founders. I think it's important that we lift as we climb and share this knowledge. Rather than wait till we get to the mountaintop, I think we need to share these stories and this insight along the way. So thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to diving in.
All right, well let's go ahead and dive in, because I know people are excited. I'm excited. You have an awesome story, Mike. And what I want to start off with is, fantastic career. Tell us, what was the trigger point for WinWin? You were an NFL player. You were busy. You had things going on. But what was the trigger? What experience did you have that said, this is something we need to do? And then, in addition to that, what would you say to someone who thinks or feels like they've got something, like they might have that bug that you had, that trigger?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 great questions. The first one I'll tackle is kind of how it came about. So I actually had finished playing in 2012, and I was making this transition. And to be honest, for those who don't know, as you mentioned, I'm from Houston. I went to Duke University. And while I was there, I was a lot more interested at the time kind of on the law degree route, right? So I was public policy major, graduated early. I, taken the LSAT and was preparing for law school. But once I was playing, remember having a lot of conversations with different players and vets about, what they're doing with their money or different business ideas. So I got more interested in business. So once I finally hung up the cleats, all I knew was, go get an MBA and figure it out from there. So I hadn't had an idea of WinWin yet, but I knew I wanted to get into business, but I hadn't even heard about tech or startups. And so it wasn't until 2013, a friend of mine told me, as I was coming home, I was going to go to Rice. I had already taken the GMAT, was ready to do that. And right at that moment, a friend told me about Draper University. And for those who don't know, as you mentioned, it's an entrepreneurship school of sorts, right in the heart of Silicon Valley, run by Tim Draper, one of the biggest VCs in the game. And it was my first time hearing the word Silicon Valley. It was the first time knowing about what a tech startup was. And so took a huge leap of faith, went out there, got exposed to it, and was blown away. I was like, hold on, I've been in the wrong game. Why didn't somebody tell me that you can build and create ideas, using technology? And so the first thing I did was taught myself how to code several programming languages, the full Adobe Design Creative Suite, just really taking the approach that I had taken on the field, that if I'm going to commit myself to something, I want to be the best at it. And all I was hearing at that time was people know how to code, people know how to do this. So I said, I'm going to equip myself. I looked at it as like, I want to play linebacker in the league. I got to hit the bench press. I got to do the squats. I got to run, right? So that, and moved out to Silicon Valley, took my young family out there, and I said, you know what? I want to dive in and start a company. But first thing I did before that, I worked at a startup. And this is where WinWin started to come into play, because it was a fast-growing startup, about $15 million raised at that point. They were actually ranked higher than Airbnb at the time in 2014. And so I was excited to be there. They gave me a shot, kind of entry level on the growth team. And within about 6 months, I was now leading the growth team. I was really making strides. And that was one thing I loved about it. Now, Silicon Valley tech has its issues, but talk about merit-based, I was able to just produce, and, I was able to move up. And so during that time, fantasy sports was really big. This started in 2015 when I became aware of kind of how big FanDuel, DraftKings, these other places were. And I always thought it was weird because a lot of my friends were still in the league and still in the league today. And I never saw them like posting like, hey, y'all draft me on FanDuel tonight, right? And I just thought that was weird because there was so much promotion about it. So I called up a couple of friends in the league and I said, how do you feel about this? And they told me that they don't like it, right? Because these companies, I found out, were making billions of dollars. The athletes aren't getting any of that, right? And so I was like, from my perspective, that's a problem. I just taught a course the other day about innovation, meaning solving problems, right? And so that problem for me was the fact that athletes aren't getting the value out of this, there has to be a better way. And so my wheels have been trained at that point to not only recognize a problem, but then start to ideate about solutions, right? And that's where innovation starts to come in. Don't just recognize it. We can all recognize a problem, but I think the real innovators try to think about, well, how can this be better, right? How can this solve the pain point? And so I started thinking about that. Long story short, some of the guys in the company were really big into fantasy. And I wasn't walking around saying I played in the NFL. So but it came up eventually. And so they're like, dude, you got to get in our fantasy league. It's $300 buy-in. You get a trophy at the end, yada, yada, yada. I was like, look, dude, I don't play fantasy. I play reality. And so they started to explain why they were playing. And they said, man, it's just fun. We get to compete, talk smack. And I was like, oh, I thought it was just gambling. So it was at that moment when I realized that, hold on, you're playing fantasy for the fun of it, because it can't be the money, because I'm hearing that 98% of the people are losing their money, right? But they continue to come back. So that's where it dawned on me. I said, wait a minute. I asked the guy right then and there, I said, what if you could play a fantasy tournament and instead of competing for money, you're winning experiences that money can't buy, like, having dinner with the player or an autographed jersey? And what if the money that you're inevitably losing could go to some charitable cause that the player cares about? And they're like, oh man, I'd do that in a heartbeat, get an autographed jersey or be on the game sideline. So I was like, okay. I went back to my athlete friends and I said, hey, what if I could use this gaming environment to get your fans to donate to your charity? Is that valuable enough for you to sign some jerseys and give away some tickets? Oh, that's easy. I'll do that all day. And boom, WinWin struck right in my mind right then and there. I've done a bit of research to kind of figure out what was in the marketplace already. And I remember it was October 15th, 2015, that it kind of hit me. I went home and I just started throwing up on paper. I was like writing down, just getting the ideas, how it could work, how this would happen, all the players that I knew. So I had the player's perspective. I knew what was valuable there. And then I was learning kind of the fan perspective and what was valuable there. And I found a way to merge the two where everybody wins, hence the name WinWin. And I even posted on Instagram that day, like, mental wheels spinning, nothing will ever be the same. And that was the start of kind of the WinWin process. I ended up incorporating the company a few months later in January, and we were off to the races. 2 weeks later, I went and pitched at the Fantasy Sports Trade Association conference, 500 people, Mark Cuban, the keynote speaker, and I was competing against 30 other fantasy companies. So it was very specific, and I ended up winning #1 with the WinWin concept. And I was like, all right, we in the game now. Let's go. That's
awesome.
Was WinWin came to be, and it's been a long journey, over the last 3.5 years, but one that I've just been relishing in, honestly, through the ups and the downs, which I'm sure we'll get into. But if you want, I can go to the second question about when somebody has that initial idea.
Yeah. That's good. I mean, when they have, I think you kind of hit on it, like, when it hits you, what I heard you said you did is you're like, okay, let me sort of validate, what I'm thinking, right? Let me go talk to my people. Let me talk to people who I do know, to people I don't know, and find out, if this is a valid idea. Is it a big enough problem? You said you did some research on that. And I think that's something really important for the audience to understand, is that, having a good idea, and we share this sometimes, right? I mean, it's your opinion, right? Like, oh, this is a good idea, I got a good idea. But if you come in with your opinion and you haven't, validated that through some sort of customer discovery or, talking to folks, that might need that good idea may not be all that good unless you do that part, right? Am I on track, or?
Yeah, so what I'll say is, that research on the front end is extremely important for a number of reasons, right? And because as you can imagine, very quickly I became the tech guy to a lot of my peers, right? And so I get hit up a lot about different ideas or things, folks want to do. And I always love having those conversations, but I started to realize that there's a front end part of the work that has to happen, right? Before you try to go out and spend money on getting developers or spend a bunch of time, there's a validation process. So I'll tell you quickly what mine was, right? So there's two parts. One, there is kind of validating the industry, right? And so I started to just do a ton of research, trying to if somebody was already doing what I was trying to do, right? That was #1. And it wasn't that it was going to stop me from doing it. It was really, and I always tell people, it's helpful to know what's in the marketplace, whether it's exactly the same or even similar, because you can glean information and strategy from what's already in the market, right? There's value to being first to market, but there's also value in being a fast follower, right? Because you're able to navigate different pitfalls that you see that they've taken, right? And so doing that, I was kind of looking at outside components like mainly FanDuel or fantasy sports, and then charitable giving like raffles, auctions, things like that were already existing. Nobody was trying to do it like we were doing it. So I started just do a lot of research, to your point, validate the market too, right? See how big this really is. And when you just look at charitable giving by itself, right? Because that's the way we make the money. It's a humongous, industry. You're talking about, $400 billion being donated just in the U.S. alone on an annual basis, right? And so I looked at both the markets. I said, okay, these are some big problems to solve, and I see a big opportunity. Now, the other thing that I thought was most important, though, was to validate the idea, to a set of people, right? Consumers, and then people that I just had in my circle at that point. This is why it's very important to keep very smart people around you.
That's
and
right.
Build those relationships, right? Because I had a set of people that I could call and run the idea down, and then they would poke holes, and I would want them to. I said, look, I don't want you to just say, oh man, that's a dope idea, like, do your thing. Like, no. I want you to try your best to come up with ways to poke holes and do different things. And what would happen is I would say the idea, and they would say, oh man, that's cool. But what about this? What about this? Like, they would ask me a question. I'll be like, that's a good question. I'll be back. I go, I do research, I figure that out, and then I go to somebody else. I say that, I say the thing. They say, well, what about this? The same thing. I'll say, oh, here's how we'll handle that. Well, what about this? You got me. Okay, good. Go back. So I did for at least 3 months. And it got to a point where some of my hardest, hole pokers, if you will, they were like, man, I'm not coming up with anything. And for me, that was like, all right, let's go. So January came and we incorporated and we got after it. So, I felt very confident going into the process at that point. I could talk about it very fluidly. I had answers, like thoughtful answers, for all questions at that point. Not that they were the right things or I could predict what was going to happen, but I had thoughtfully, considered what the challenges or the pitfalls could be. And so that was very important. And I think it really helped accelerate our process.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So really great takeaway. So I hope y'all are taking some notes on here. So I'm going to shift gears. Probably have time for maybe two more questions, and I want to open it up to the rest of the group before we get into the next stage. So we're in COVID-19, right? And so everybody is talking about pivoting, and gotta change the game up, gotta change it up somewhere. Your situation is really kind of interesting, right? So number one, are you in the midst of pivoting? And if not, okay, what changes have you got going on? Because right now sports are shut down. So what's happening with WinWin right now? How are you dealing with it? And then as you think about that, I know you've pivoted probably a couple of times before. What goes into a good pivot?
Yeah, great.
So where's WinWin right now? And then what goes into a good pivot?
Great question. So WinWin at the moment, so we've been in operation essentially since the middle of 2016. And so it's been a great journey. And to your point, there's been ups and downs, there's been pivots, if you will, right? And one thing I always got to explain and share with, aspiring founders or people, still in their earlier stages is not to get discouraged, right, when things don't work. Because I can guarantee you that it's not going to work as well as you think it's going to work, and it's probably going to cost twice as much as you thought it was going to cost, right? And so you have to plan for that. And I actually look at the pivot as a great thing, right? Once you get, like you talk about milestones, once you hit your first pivot and then, your iterations thereafter, that means you're actually doing enough to know what's not working and getting closer to what is working, right? We call that product market fit. Right? And so you have to get to product market fit before you start to do a bunch of spending money on marketing and all these things, right? So for us, we got a few like pretty significant pivots within like the first year and a half, right? And I was very at the moment, to be honest, I was kind of like, oh man, I thought this thing was rock solid, and we raised $1 million right out the gate before we had the product, which is very, very rare.
Very rare.
But yeah, it's very rare. We had a different type of traction, right? We already had, Hall of Fame players that were committed to be on the platform before we had the platform, which is arguably the hardest part of our business is getting athletes to buy in, right? So that's the thing that's always been our competitive advantage. And, shout out to our early investors because they believed in that, and they still do, right? And so to your point, we were iterating, and we just had, to your point, a pretty significant shift in our model that, is the pivot. And it's the bigger pivot. And for me, the fact that we've survived long enough to get to that point just means that we're on to something, right? Because what I explain to people is like startups in your first few years is not about reaching success immediately. It's really about survival, right? If you can survive the inevitable onslaught of adversity long enough to where you figure out what you're doing, then you're ahead of the game. Where you see 9 out of 10 startups fail, about 5 or 6 of those are within the first few years, right? Because they for whatever reason, founder drama, running out of money, insufficient team, right? Those are the things. It's not even about the idea, right? Because
right.
a bunch of people can have the same idea with different outcomes. And so I've been proud that we've been able to survive some pretty significant dips to get to this point where we figured it out. So we were working on a pivot pre-COVID-19, actually around January, February, and we were getting ready to kind of like really dive into that. And then boom, COVID hit, right? Right, like literally right as we came up with what the pivot is, we looked at all the data, we did some, market research, industry experts, and we realized like, boom, here's the thing. Now I can go into detail on what that is specifically, but we figured that out. I was very excited, and then COVID hit, right? All sports wiped out. It was like, oh, snap, okay. We gotta figure out, what we're gonna do. And, I'm thankful that the team around us, advisors, board members, we were able to like really, look at the landscape, right? And when you ask about pivots, it's like you have to be free of like attachment to your ideas previous, right? That's what I always tell people. Like you can't have an ego like, no, I came up with the original thing and we're gonna make sure it works. Like, no, that like soon as I look at the data, I'm like, oh, it don't work, get it out of here. Let's go. Next thing. Right. All I care about is winning. I'm not so ego driven like, oh man, that's my little baby that, that original idea. Like, no, we want to just win. So that's what we did. And, right now what we're doing, just to give anybody like a baseline understanding, if they don't know, WinWin, we combine giving with gaming to make donating to charity a lot more fun. So these athletes host these tournaments where, for example, as a fan, you're able to join by predicting who's going to win week 10 matchups in the NFL, right? You join, you make the predictions, you're able to donate, fully tax deductible, you earn perks by donating, and then what you're competing for is not money, but instead experiences money can't buy, like having dinner with Deshaun Jackson after the game or sideline passes, you name it. So that's win-win. Now, obviously, at the moment, there's no games to predict, right, in terms of NBA, NFL. And so what we looked at, we looked at the landscape. We said there's millions of people at home right now, very captive audience, all looking for sports, outlets. Even content like ESPN and other places are just trying to find anything to play or show. And so we looked at an opportunity to bring in video gaming. So now what we're doing is we're having these matchups that are simulated on video games. So it's not esports. We don't have somebody playing the game. We have simulated matchups that are having, like the 95 Bulls versus the 2017 Warriors, right? Matchups that we would never see in our lifetime in real life, but this is the closest way we can see them. And so fans will be able to join a tournament hosted by an athlete, predict those games, and we have a live stream where the featured game is being played, and we have some celebrities that are commentating. So you can imagine like your favorite comedian, commentating actual Monday Night Football. So it'd be hilarious, banter, and you can engage with fans in real time as they're watching, via Twitch or YouTube Live. So we're really excited about it. It's actually going to launch here in the next couple of weeks. So I'm really excited about the fact that we found a way to pivot and the impact piece of it, right? Because that's what we're about, win-win. The money that's raised is actually going to purchase specifically KN95 masks that is FDA approved. We have a direct line to distributors there. And so we're gonna enable our athletes and influencers to put those masks directly into the possession of frontline medical workers in whatever city or hospital that they want. So they're using our platform at WinWin to raise money, drive that PPE where they want it to go, and give fans an opportunity to join in, make the predictions, add their support, and then win some amazing stuff like FaceTime calls with your favorite athletes. So that's what we're doing right now.
Awesome.
And the pivot I was so excited when we figured out the pivot, right? Because I'm like that just means that we moved more stuff. Like, okay, this isn't working as well, and we're much closer to product market fit. And I think that's what the goal is to get to product market fit, and then that's when you really scale up.
That's awesome, Mike. I love the pivot. I love the give back and the mass that you guys are producing. For the frontline workers, that's a beautiful thing. And I think that's important too, because a lot of people will build businesses and they're not necessarily look at themselves as social impact. They can be a business that does give back to the community. You can still serve the community with your for-profit business. So that's a beautiful thing. I know we had a question that came up. And what I want to do too is, you guys heard what Mike was talking about. I know a lot of you got to be jazzed up about, what's coming in a couple of weeks. Y'all need to go ahead and start downloading WinWin. Go ahead and get going with it. Because I know, I'm not a gamer myself, but I know that this next revision of WinWin is going to be, it's going to be pretty hot, Mike. So congrats on that. So this next question that came up from the audience was, what is your best advice when building a team in the very early stages? And that question came from Ryan Lewis.
Ryan,
what's the best advice for building a team in the very early stages?
Great question. Yeah, I get animated about this question because, Lord, I learned through the fire on this one, guys. There's a saying, right? Hire slow, fire fast, right? And I think, that's something. The hiring process, to be quite honest, isn't even something that I've perfected at this point, right? So when we first started, I mentioned that we raised $1 million, like right out the gate. I incorporated in January, and by May and June, I had $1 million from early stage investors in Silicon Valley and New York. And right away, because I was trying to make it to launch by that NFL season, so I started recruiting a team, and a process. Diligence is extremely important, right? Let me just say that, because I was kind of taking the going by my gut, kind of thought process, and sometimes folks aren't who they say they are, and I got into an expensive lesson of understanding when you need to hire, right? And so I ended up hiring, I think, 10 people right away, in Silicon Valley, full-time salary. So you can imagine, how that burn rate was. So my best advice is to only hire when it hurts, right? Like, understand exactly what you need to do and what you would have them to do, right? So that you're getting the most efficient use of your capital, through the team that you're building, right? And the other part, there's a human side of it and a compatibility side of it, where you got to make sure that you're bringing on people, especially when you're talking full-time roles, that truly believe in it, right? Especially in these early days, right? Because even what you're pitching them to recruit them onto the team, 6 weeks later, it's probably not even going to be that thing. I'm telling you from a direct experience. And if you don't have folks that are bought into the underlying, purpose of the company and what we ultimately want to figure out and solve, then, you start to hit some walls, and it can cause some issue internally that ultimately stifles your ability to get to that product market reach, right? Again, as I mentioned, a lot of companies fail because of the breakdown of the team or not having the right people. So my advice would just be to really figure out what it is you need in terms of the functions, right, that you need to get done. And you can, the best case is where you have people that are really bought in and they can do several functions, right? Because you need a small, lean team, right? And you need people that believe in it. Now, it's tough. I'll be honest, it's one of the hardest things that I've gone through and continue to go through in building my company, is getting the right team, right? Because that is ultimately the power of the company's ability. Right? Like I told you, 10 people can have the same exact idea, and they all run off and do their thing. They build 10 different teams. It's going to be 10 different outcomes, again, not because of 10 different ideas, right? Those 10 different teams, the unique makeup of that unit is going to power that company either up or down, right? And so that's where you got to be really thoughtful about it, and you don't want to spend a ton of money. One other thing I'll mention is leveraging consultants, right? And there's some interesting and unique ways that you can get people on, right? Because we're talking early stage, so you probably don't even have money yet. Right? So you have to be creative. I remember getting creative and having kind of deferred, contracts or different payment options, when it came to our early hires, because before we raised that money, we didn't have it initially, right? And so there's interesting ways that you can leverage consultants, Fractional executives. That's another big thing right now that's growing. We have a fractional CFO that's been a godsend for us without having to really take on a full-time CFO. So there's a lot of different bits to that. Hopefully that was helpful. And, I got my email up here. I'd be happy to chat with folks in more detail on that.
All right, cool, man. Thanks, Mike. That was really insightful. And I will just pile on to that. Team is critical. I mean, the team is so critical. We can't emphasize it enough.
Right.
Right people, hire when you're hurting, right? Hire when you're hurting, because you will burn through your cash and put you in a position where you're going to have to close the doors. You don't want that to be the reason why you're closing doors. So great insight there. I'm probably going to ask one more question. I know there's a question from the audience. So we got like two, Mike, and we're going to try to keep it tight.
Yeah,
so
no
one question was about 500 startups in your experience there. So since it's coming from the audience, I'm going to answer that question first. Okay. That question comes from Roman Gonzalez, based out of Austin. 500 startups, experience, and then value that you got from there.
Yeah, great question. I'm glad I saw you mention Clayton. Clayton was actually one of my designated advisor mentors, and Clayton's a great guy. So 500, we went through 500 in the spring of 2017, and I'll be honest, it was phenomenal. It was just what we needed at the time. The biggest value that came out of it, was the fact that it was the in-house cohort, right? So like we basically worked from there for 3 months. Right, in their office every day. And so big value was just being around other companies. We had about, I think, 52 companies in our batch 20. And just the camaraderie and like to be able to talk to other founders that are in totally different lanes, but, going through similar things. I think that's the power of really any, accelerator, incubator type of program, is to really invest in getting to know the other founders. They did tell us, though, when we first started, they said, look to your right, look to your left, right? Statistically, you may be working for them or they might be working for you, right? Because, again, that's just the start of the game. So those relationships were of extreme value, and really even to this day. Some of my batchmates who may be running a company still or not, I'm able to pick up the phone and talk to them about a problem. Part of our pivot is also towards B2B. So I've been able to like really pick the brains of others in my cohort there. The other part of value specifically through 500 was the mentor network, right? I think that's really the power of any accelerator, is having strong mentor network that's active, right? That can really talk and work with the founders. So I had immediate access to being able to talk with folks that were domain, experts on, monetization, gaming mechanics. I mean, these were the things that really helped us in those first several iterations of pivot. So I really loved 500 startups. I still stay in touch with a lot of those guys. Obviously, they're investors in the company as well, so gotta do that. And we were actually right before, hate to bring it up, but the kind of Dave McClure debacle. So we were like right before that. I know that some things have changed and they kind of dipped, but I hear that they're doing quite well now. But to end that, I think any accelerator can be of value, and that's where you really, as a founder, you want to do your research, because just because it's a 500 or YC or any of them, right, regardless of where they are, you have to think about what it is that's best for your company. Look at the mentors, the people that are involved, because those are the folks that make the difference. Now, it helps to have certain names in certain situations, but you really want to be thoughtful and build relationships. I think overall, these accelerator programs are most valuable because of the relationships that you get, both with the batchmates as well as the mentor network that you have. I think that's extremely important.
Awesome, thanks, Mike. All right, so I think I'm going to squeeze one more question here, and then we're going to go ahead and get to the panel. So I know, right, COVID-19, people are, their runways are short. Some folks have to close doors. Financial capital is like we need it, right? And historically, I showed earlier that people of color, women are not getting access to equity capital at parity. Okay, and you've been fortunate, right? You got your first million before the product was even ready. That is, you acknowledge the fact that it's a rare situation, very rare situation. Can you provide, I guess in a condensed fashion, so we don't go too long, but your insight to fundraising? So you got your first million, and then now you are on an equity crowdfunding platform called Republic, and you're having some pretty good success there. And recently, another friend of mine, Dawn Dixon, is having crazy success on Start Engine crowdfunding platform. Let's talk a little bit about, just provide some insight with regards to, the financial capital, alternative funding options out there, and how you feel about them and what you recommend.
Yeah, great question. So I'll keep it concise. Number one, I always recommend to founders to really think about if they're fundable, if you will, right? Like in the way of, VC funding, like you need to understand as a founder what the different avenues are, right? Because everybody thinks VC, but not all companies are, necessarily need to be VC backed. They actually don't want to be if they really know what's going on. So that's step one, right? But to your point, the alternative routes of fundraising, I think, are phenomenal, particularly equity crowdfunding for a number of reasons, right? As you mentioned, minority founders, African-American founders, disproportionately, are seeing the issues when it comes to raising. I have some deeper thoughts on that, we'll save for another conversation. But, I think when you look at equity crowdfunding, it opens up that avenue to where you don't have to go, pitch kind of the atypical investor who probably doesn't look like you, doesn't understand kind of what you're about or where you're coming from and all of that, which makes it inevitably harder. So you can open that up to the masses. And, if you could do a good job, like you mentioned, Don, good friend of mine, investor in WinWin, she's phenomenal in being able to tell that story to the masses. You're talking about some very hard tech that she's built, right? And she's able to make that understandable for the average person. And so that's why I think she's done so well. But it becomes a very valuable tool and avenue for us. I think I have a lot of thoughts that I'll save for another conversation about how you run a equity crowdfunding campaign successfully, a lot of which I learned from Dawn. I was consulting with Dawn before I launched mine last year. We ended in September with $327,000, and it really helped our company. And the big value that came out of that, though, is we had an army full of new investors who are now essentially users who are vested in seeing WinWin succeed. Right.
That's
so
right.
Putting stuff out, they're liking, they're following, they're joining, they're sharing. Right. This is very, very important when you talk about helping grow your company and that viral loop. Right. When you have a set of folks that are stakeholders, right, that's very important, and they believe in what it is you're doing. So I'm a big advocate of equity crowdfunding for founders that are considering that. I would say strongly consider it. But the big thing is there's a pretty significant amount of work that goes into doing it well. Right now, it's not like, hell, even Kickstarter and other, crowdfunding per se is hard as well. But when you're talking about investing to the general public, who I can tell you probably 85%, 90% of our equity crowdfunding investors, it was in first investment. Right. And so there's a lot of communication and education that comes into that. But it is a phenomenal way for you to, bridge a gap between your funding, get you that initial startup capital, and raise an army full of folks that are behind your back supporting you along the way. So big advocate there, and I'm happy to talk more offline with anybody who has more questions.
Oh, awesome. And I will reiterate Mike's point about equity crowdfunding being a great option, but it's a lot of work, right? It's not just throwing it up there For those of you who didn't catch it, Mike's done it. I mean, several other people have done it, but Republic, is it Republic.com or Republic.co?
Yeah, Republic.co.
Okay, and then the other one was StayEngine.com, which is the platform that Dawn used.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Startup.
Start Engine.
StartEngine.com. I'm sorry, StartEngine.com is what Dawn used. Dawn raised like $500,000 in 30 days or something to that effect.
Her first raise, she maxed it out. She went to 1.7 million. She actually raised, I think, 1.4, but she could only take 1.07. And so, she's killing it. I think she just actually. So I would encourage folks to go try to jump in on that because she got a rocket ship for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so Mike, we are sort of out of time, man, and I love talking with you. I mean, we got more questions to talk about, more stuff to talk about, but we've got to cut short here. Really appreciate you joining us and sharing your insights and your wisdom and making yourself available as well to this audience. So we're going to get Mike's info out there for you, and you can reach him. And I can tell you, he's willing to help anybody that's willing to help themselves and really make a difference. So thanks again, Mike. Really appreciate it. And everybody, check WinWin out. Try WinWin.com.
Right.
And also check out the one thing I wanted to mention too was the WinWin Foundation. We didn't get a chance to talk about that, but the WinWin Foundation is also a phenomenal a piece of the WinWin family, if you will. So, Mike, thanks again, man. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Preston, and the whole team. Thanks so much for having me. I look forward to sticking around and hearing the rest of the panel. Thanks so much.
Awesome. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to transition it to my side town, Joy M. Hutton, who will be basically the moderator for our panel this evening. And I hope all of you will stay on for this panel because there's some powerhouse folks with broad industry experience from the entrepreneurship perspective as well as from the investment perspective and the co-working perspective, and what we'll be talking about some really, I'm just going to leave it, really interesting stuff. So Joy, let me go ahead and turn it over to you. Please welcome Joy M. Hutton.
Thank you. Okay. Hello again, everyone. I am Joy M. Hutton. I guess I didn't introduce myself because I was caught up in the technology glitches and everything going on. So I am Joy M. Hutton, and as I said, as Preston said, I am boots on the ground in Houston for DivInc, but I am also a serial entrepreneur. I am the founder of Joy of Consulting, an organizational development consulting firm. And, like Mike said, it leverage consultants for hiring and firing. Operations is also the founder of On The Go Glam, a multi-sided marketplace where we deliver hair, makeup, and nail services to people. So think Uber of beauty. And today we are going to get into this panel. And so as Preston said earlier, DivInc has identified a formula for success that consists of collaboration throughout all stages in the entrepreneurship journey. But it requires leaders that genuinely believe in being authentically inclusive. And most importantly, they act with intentionality all of the time to make it a reality. And so today, we're going to get into this panel and talk to some of those leaders who are committed to being intentional and to building diverse, equitable, and inclusive ecosystems. So now that I have introduced myself, I want to get into this panel. So I'll just go in the order that it appears on this slide. And if everyone could turn on their cameras. Bryan, I can't see you. Tiffany, I can't see you. And, okay, let me turn yours on. Okay. And let's see, I see Gaby. Okay, there's Tiffany. Okay, where is Heath? Let me see. I thought I saw Heath in the chat. Give me one second while I find Heath. Let's see. Heath, where are you? Okay, Heath, I am promoting you to a panelist. Okay. And there we are. There's Heath. And okay, we want to see your face, Heath. There you are. Okay.
I'm
We have
here.
got
I'm here.
all the panelists. Welcome, everyone. And so if you all could just take a couple of minutes and introduce yourselves, we'll go ahead and start from left to right. So Tiffany Williams.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tiffany Williams, and I am the co-founder and managing director for Diversity Fund Houston. We are a micro venture capital fund created to invest in Black and Brown technology founders. And I am excited to be here this evening to learn and contribute to make a more diverse and inclusive ecosystem here in the city of Houston and beyond.
Juliana.
Good evening, everybody. So good to be on this happy hour. So I'm Juliana Garaizar. I'm the president of the Business Angel Minority Association. I'm also a lead investor for portfolio fund Rising America, investing in Black and Brown founder, LGBTQ founders and markets, companies that are addressing those markets. I'm also a board member of the Angel Capital Association, which is the umbrella association for all angel networks and early stage funds in North America. So glad to be here.
All right, my name is Bryan Chambers. I'm our Vice President of Accelerator and Investment Fund at Capital Factory, where I manage a team, our venture team across the whole state, responsible for sourcing technology startups for our accelerator and our investment fund. I'm also a member of the faculty at UT Dallas, where I design and teach experiential learning in regards to how to make a venture capital investment and how to start a technology startup.
Great. Heath, you are up next.
Sure, thank you. I'm Heath Butler. I'm a network partner with Mercury Fund, and I'm also co-founder with Urban Capital Network, where we are providing angel investors with unique access to venture capital investments, and then donating a portion of our investment return to a nonprofit diversity fund for social impact. So glad to be here.
Awesome. And finally, Gaby Rowe.
Hey, Joy, and thank you guys for having me tonight. I'm Gaby Rowe, the executive director of the ION, which is a 300,000 square foot innovation hub being developed in the middle of Houston, stewarded by Rice University. And its primary purpose is to help build an innovation economy and innovation ecosystem for Houstonians in the city of Houston. And what that means, as the most diverse city in the United States, it means our mandate is to constructively, thoughtfully, and strategically build an inclusive and equitable innovation ecosystem. And so this is something that we think about every day, and that we, in particular, think about the ways in which we can do it differently than pretty much every other ecosystem that's built up in the United States before. So thank you so much for having me tonight.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you for that introduction, you all. Okay. So we will get right to it. The first question. You all have been in the startup ecosystem for a while. What are the challenges associated with building an inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem? Now let's see who wants to give it a shot first.
Well, I can jump in, since this is what I live and breathe and think every single day. It's systemic. I think that there's probably 10 or 20 or even more things you could name, like internal bias, bias in education systems, all the way through investing. But really the theme word for us continually is systemic bias. And for example, one of the projects that I'm working on right now is digital deserts that we have in Houston. And you think, well, this is really, right now it relates to education and how kids are getting virtual learning. But the reality is those 200,000 children that we have in Houston that don't have digital access are in households that don't have digital access, which means they're not getting the STEM skills. Their parents are not getting the upskills workforce. They're not getting exposure to this quote unquote tech economy that we're building, and they will unquestionably be left behind as we grow an innovation economy in Houston if we don't change that. So that's one example of what we think of when we think systemic. And the reality is we can't do one of those things. We have to do all of those things simultaneously, or we will follow in the footsteps of many other ecosystems around the United States where technology has actually served to widen the gap, not to close it. And we really can't let that happen in the city of Houston.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
Yeah, to follow on Gaby's comments, I think, education is key, and data is key to eliminate bias. I think there's a lot of bias out there about how women entrepreneurs or Black and brown founders, in many cases, they mention things like they're more averse to risk, which is actually not true, and data shows that it's not true. We normally have data that sustains that we are more cash efficient, that when we run companies, we have bigger ROI. And those are things that in general get overlooked because there's not enough data there, making sure that people understand that this is what happens when we invest in diverse teams and inclusive teams. So when we invest in diverse and inclusive teams, we get 35% more of ROI. And that's not to say that, we have to do it because we get more money. We also have to do it because it's the right thing to do, so we are not trying to have this approach where it's opportunistic to do. Is also the right thing to do. And most of the gaps that we see there is because investors don't look like entrepreneurs. And that's one of the things that we've been trying to do with BAMA or with Portfolio. We're trying to activate more diverse investors because we know that investors invest with people they know, and they also invest in people they know. So the more diverse the investor layer is, then it will trickle down, and basically we will be able to invest in more diverse entrepreneurs. So one of the key things we're doing is educating and trying to make sure we activate more investors, but also empowerment. Empowerment is even more important than the education, because we really believe that there's a lot of investors out there that are accredited investors, and they could be doing great things, but they don't feel empowered to do so. First of all, because they don't get access to the right networks, and then because they are not asked to do it. So our mission is to try to activate all these people, because we should, as Houstonians, we should stop waiting for VCs to come from Silicon Valley or from the East Coast to save us. We have the tools, we have the means, and we need to activate ourselves and not wait for anybody else to save our ecosystem. We really can do it on our own if we put our minds to it.
On that,
that I definitely agree with Gaby as well as Juliana, and I think another one, Juliana touched on it. It's relationship based when you think about what the challenges are, and there's a lot of ways that I know from Houston Exponential to the ION and all of the angel groups out there. We have to create more extensions to relationships. When you think about something that's really at play in the digital world, the network effect, it's called Metcalfe's law, and things are moving very fast. And when innovation's moving very fast, people typically grab hold of the people that can help them. And if you're not in those networks, and you're not you don't have those relationships, you tend to miss out. And unfortunately, Black and brown, just professionals, not even entrepreneurs, let's just say professionals, because I think we've got a two-layered problem, right? We've got a problem around entrepreneurs, and I would argue that that's a small problem. The bigger problem is the job and income problem. And when you can increase the jobs that are available to the community, the entrepreneurs will come out of it, right? So one of the challenges we really have to focus on is before we really get to the entrepreneurs and the investors, is we need to create more jobs, more income, higher incomes, and more wealth, and then you'll have more investors, and then those investors can invest in Black and brown communities, right? So I actually think that the relationships related to creating jobs and income is a huge challenge, and I know Gaby's working on that very hard, and Houston Exponential is working on that. So just exciting to be a part of it. And Joy, I know you got some additional questions around these types of things, but I think structural, the relationship issue is one that we need to bring to the forefront as well.
To add on to everyone's comments, I'm in violent agreement with everybody. But there's one thing we know is that diversity drives diversity. And ecosystems are marketplaces with many different constituents. They include investors, they include founders, they include mentors, they include staff of the organizations. There's lots of layers of inclusion and lots of different constituents. And so I think, when we look at an ecosystem, one of the biggest things that we can do is just make sure that the place that we start, our own organizations are diverse. And that's what we're focused on. It's one of the challenges that we're working really hard to tackle ourselves every day when we wake up and look in the mirror, is making sure that we have more diverse LPs in our fund, that we have more diverse mentors. And we know this, it's such a human element for people to go to the places that they find other people that they are most comfortable at, where they find other people that look like them. And so the best thing that we can do is really look inward and create our organization to be more diverse, and let that ripple effect take place in the ecosystem. And so we look really inward, and we think that that's the solution. And it's hard. There's a really big challenge. We wake up every single day to work on this, but I think that that's where we think it really starts, is in our own organization, our own mentor network, our own LP network. And so we have initiatives to change this, and we think by changing this, we'll be able to, to help change the statistics.
Yeah, so I agree with all of the sentiments shared so far, especially the relationship piece. And I think one of the main reasons we don't have access in our communities is because we don't come to the table with skin in the game, as the VCs typically want. They want to see that you've raised a friends and family round. And quite frankly, people in our community don't always have access to friends and family that they can call and say, hey, do you have $50,000 to fund this idea that I have? A lot of times that answer is no. And so one of the things we're doing at Diversity Fund Houston is becoming that friends and family round. So investing very early in Black and brown founders that wouldn't otherwise have access to that kind of capital, so that they can at least build up that MVP or that, that wireframe or that click-through site or something that they can then take to a traditional larger VC and get some more money to scale. So just kind of creating that pathway, because again, to everybody's points, I mean, it's really about that relationship and feeling comfortable in those spaces. And so it's going to take a lot of work, because Gaby, to your point, it is systemic, and there's so many different layers. So we've got a lot of work to do, but I think with all of our respective organizations, we're definitely going to start to see the shift. So I'm excited to move forward.
Awesome. So you all have answered the question, but I want to encourage us to dig a little deeper in this, because a lot of people hear that, yes, we're going to do this, yes, we're going to do that, but exactly how are we going to educate investors, like some tangible examples about how we're going to do this? Because we can, have panels like this all day and say, yes, we're pushing to have a greater startup ecosystem, but I want to really give the people on the call some hope that things are really going to change. And so I want to just dig deeper, because, okay, we've identified some whys, right? Systemic problems, your net worth, which we say your net worth gets your net worth. But if you don't know how to get access to these resources, where do you even begin? Investors are a long shot if you have no idea where to even start within your own community. So getting aside, like, okay, why, like I said, we've identified biases, right, with investors. We've identified systemic oppression, like Gaby said, the job and income gap, your network. But how, like these very specific, how are we going to do that? Because we have to move this needle forward beyond just having conversations about that. So does anyone have like any very specific actions that are being taken within each of your ecosystems?
Well, Joy, I'm going to use inappropriate language and say stop talking and just get shit done.
Exactly.
I mean,
pretty much, Gaby. That's what I'm trying to get at here.
I mean, it's
every. But what does that look like? You know.
But I think it kind of looks like that too, which is let's just stop talking about the damn problem and address each part of it. We identified the systemic challenges. We know there's education, there's an income gap, there is even bigger employment issues, workforce issues now than there was yesterday. So take your piece of it and prioritize. And there's lots of when it finally comes to that action, what I think many people who are probably listening to this have seen over and over again is, yeah, well, I know that was important, but I'm going to prioritize something else over the need of the Black and Brown community. I'm going to prioritize something else over education. I'm going to prioritize something else over digital access. And those of us who are tasked and have the privilege of being in positions to drive forward have to say, stop. Our priorities are different, and I'm going to act, but I'm going to act for groups who haven't had what they need in order to close the gap. Otherwise, it's just a whole lot of talk and no action. And that means when people start talking about closing digital gap, it's like, okay, how many machines are you going to give me? How many hotspots are you going to give me? Give me the data to show me exactly whose hands they're going to be in, and give me a time frame that is less than a month when those people are going to be online. Okay, let's check all those boxes. Let's do it. Then let's move on. Let's project manage to conclusion instead of circular dialogue, which in many instances allows people to reprioritize away from these areas.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. We just got to take action, and fortunately, Joy, you have loaded this panel with people that are taking action in a number of areas. So I'll try to be brief. Similar to what Gaby's saying, we know the VCs have not funded businesses at the same levels, and our businesses in our communities at the same levels when you look at the majority community. So what can they do? One of the things they can do is as they continue their investments, especially in Series A and beyond companies, they continue to get allocations to invest in those early stage, but now de-risked and high growth companies. They can share some of those allocations, and that's what we're doing at Urban Capital Network. So we've partnered with 3 funds, and we've talked to over a dozen that are committed to work with us, and we're increasing the investor base so that unlike maybe traditional angel opportunities, we're bringing investors into Series A extension, Series B, Series C deals. We've got one now where we've got 6 companies packaged together. What that allows us to do is get investors into later stage deals. They're a little bit de-risked, and then we're asking them to take a piece of their profit to donate it to our nonprofit. And we're going to make the first investment from that nonprofit this summer in a company that went through Gaby's, the ION's Smart City Accelerator. So we're really excited to see it moving, and then we just need to put it on steroids. So in a very small way, we're making investments, and as we make those investments, we donate to the nonprofit and get it done. So this is one way that VCs can contribute, and we've gotten rave reviews from them and willingness to participate. So we're trying to take action in that way to drive impact to the community.
So to follow on Heath, I think it's very important that when we're trying to activate new investors who are diverse but new to early stage investing, this access to great deals from curated networks is essential, because otherwise, they're going to get burned. Early stage investing is very risky. We should only allocate 10% of our portfolio to this asset class, and then we should have a diversified portfolio. That means that we need to have at least 10 investments. And most of the startups require a minimum investment of 25K. So that means that you would need to have a 250K amount to be able to diversify your portfolio. And that's why investing in funds that can do that for you and which ticket sizes are lower, like the Houston Diversity Fund or like the portfolio funds that have a 10K initial ticket, is the way to go for new investors. And these funds like Heath's fund or Portfolio or BAMA, what we're trying to do is co-invest with the greatest, you know. So for Portfolio, now we're having a Series C investment that had Sequoia on their previous rounds and still have Sequoia on their last round. So those are the kind of deals that, you know, as angels individually, we would never have access to. But if we are plugged into the right network, we can do it. And why it is beneficial for, you know, companies that have access to big funds like, you know, Sequoia or Andreessen Horowitz, is just because they want to have access to these diverse communities. So they are really ready to putting like a small piece of their cap table to funds that are doing the right thing by connecting them with the right people. And don't get me wrong, I mean, the markets for Black and brown are, you know, we are going to be, BAMA has an M minority because we're going to become the majority pretty soon. You know, our markets are growing, and pretty much in 20 years, we're going to be a majority. So there's a lot of opportunities to invest in the right things that are going to be growing at staggering amounts. In terms of another thing that the city of Houston is doing greatly, I think, you know, the fact that the mayor of Houston put together this task in diversity, you know, minority and women founders has been great, and a lot of great initiatives have come out of that. Of course, Caroline Rhodes with Hello Alice has put together a database, and I think access to that database for resources for Black and brown and minority entrepreneurs is essential. And also out of that, and you know, the initiatives like BAMA and the Diversity Fund have come out. So I really think the city of Houston, being the most diverse city in the US, is taking the lead in making this a huge issue for us. And we are really putting our money where our mouth is by doing all these great initiatives.
Yeah, so one of the things we're doing at Diversity Fund Houston is meeting the entrepreneurs where they are. So we've partnered with several community organizations that have been doing the work with this particular demographic. So one of our first partners to sign on was the Houston Area Urban League. They've had a small business university that they've been facilitating for over 10 years. And I myself went through that program. I didn't mention this earlier in my introduction, but I also have a business that I've had for almost 8 years now. And when I first got to Houston, I took the small business university. And, you know, at that point, the entrepreneurs were meeting them at their rawest stage. A lot of them aren't comfortable going to some other spaces where no one looks like them. So Juliana, to your point earlier about empowering them, I think that, you know, that's what we've taken on as our responsibility. Give them the education, give them the nurturing, give them the resources, and then give them the confidence to walk into some of these other spaces where they may be the only one that looks like them, but that they can still approach a prospective investor and know that they are just as qualified as everybody else in that room. So we're, again, just meeting them where they are by partnering with organizations that have already been doing the work and helping these entrepreneurs, but really giving them the capital as well, because I think that's the piece that's been historically missing, is that, yeah, you're giving them all this education and they're jumping from program to program, and they've got all of this information. I myself went through several programs, but where's the money actually coming from that's actually going to help these entrepreneurs scale their businesses? And so that's one of the things that that we're doing at Diversity Fund.
I also want to just give a shout out to DivInc and say that's one of the ways in which Houston needs to get it right, and partnering with DivInc to bring what you've done in Austin and bring it to Houston for Houstonians. It's all about partnering with an ecosystem. To Bryan's point of you're building, you know, a functional set of partners that are going to work together toward a common goal. It's having partners like DivInc come in and help us do that for the city of Houston. It's essential to making it reality as opposed to just talk.
Yeah, a couple of themes that I hear across everybody, but some things that we're doing and some maybe more concrete as to what are we actually doing. But first and foremost, we started a diversity, equity, and inclusion program that relentlessly measures everything every day, every week, every month. And that's really important to get a grasp on things, to understand how are we improving, what are the actions are we taking, and what are the results. But specifically, I think it's it's the new partnerships, it's diverse partnerships that are being struck that lead to more diversity as well. And the partnership that we have with DivInc is a perfect example of that. Each year, just 3 weeks ago, on April 11th, we held a $100,000 Black in Tech investment challenge. And it's not going to be the only diversity investment challenge that we hold this year. We'll do another one in July. We'll do another one in the fall. And every single year, we very intentionally earmark and allocate funds for an investment challenge. It looks a lot like a pitch competition, very intentionally, because it drives a lot of attention that way. And we invite a lot of investors to that, to also see and observe all the fantastic founders and the great companies that are pitching as well. And so that, we think, is just a step in the right direction. It's one thing that we're doing, is we're earmarking those funds. We're very intentionally holding events, gathering the right people, or what we're trying to gather the right people, and then intentionally making an investment in diverse founders. And we think that is very helpful when we wave $100,000 in the air. One person doesn't just win; many people win. It just takes one person might only receive the $100,000, but the results from that over time are pretty significant as we measure as well.
Yeah, to follow up on events that BAMA has been created since we were founding on March 5th, and we were really, we had a great launch event, but then of course COVID hit and we had to reinvent ourselves. We've been doing 2 weekly panels. We called it like the BAMA Investor Academy. So there's Angel 101 and Advanced Angel Education. But to make sure we became more inclusive, we just didn't want to be the only ones having that, making sure that the courses were only from BAMA. So we're creating the Diversity Investor Academy, and we're bringing in more groups to make sure we have different views and different people from very different places, making sure that they add to this educational series for investors. So we're having Black VC. We have this new Latino angel group called Angeles. We're having, Boston groups that are investing in Black and Brown. And we're really trying to make sure that all the people who are trying to do things in diversity are connected. And I really believe that because a lot of these initiatives, unfortunately, are very scattered. Not many people know about it. And I think it's time that we put all of them together and we really piggyback on each other's initiatives and we don't reinvent the wheel. So one of the things that Hello Alice has created is called the Latino Roundtable monthly call. And we're trying to figure out what initiatives are there all over the US for Latinos and try to put them together in a repository so that Latino founders know what they have available. And we're really trying to do that more and more.
Right. Those were great responses. Thank you for that. We just kind of dig deeper sometimes. And so Tiffany, I know you all are doing the Diversity Fund. What are some, because I like the fact that you say you meet entrepreneurs where they are, because entrepreneurs need help before they even get to the investor round. They need to know how to pitch. They need to know all those different things. And so, like you said, you went through the Small Business University. And so what are some of even gathering the resources that you all are at the Diversity Fund, what are some of the barriers and the challenges that you're facing even with gathering those resources, and even some of the things that you're seeing consistently with these entrepreneurs, these young entrepreneurs?
I think it's just lack of knowledge in this space, not knowing how to navigate it. I mean, being an entrepreneur is a lot of work. And I think it looks really sexy on Instagram to be an entrepreneur, but there's so much more work that goes into it. And so really trying to prepare them to build a solid foundation so that they're prepared to not only go raise money, but to just sustain the business and do all of the work. So something as simple as encouraging them to get a co-founder. A lot of businesses that come in want to do everything themselves. They want to, they want to start from the bottom and go up, and it's so much harder. So just really giving them the education has been our biggest focus through partnering with organizations like Hall. And one of the things they do in that class is have the participants practice their pitch every week. And then they culminate the class by having them participate in a pitch competition. Joy, you participated in that as well. And so we've really just seen that the lack of education in this space of what it means to build and sustain a business, and then to pitch to a VC and really go after capital. That's been the biggest thing, because they have the drive, they have the intellect, they have everything they need. But what we're seeing is there's a lack of education, and then of course there's the lack of capital. So that's been our biggest issue, is really just trying to educate the entrepreneurs where they are and make sure they're prepared as they move along the journey.
Great, thank you. Okay, so what do you all envision for your respective organizations or ecosystems in the next 5 to 10 years as it pertains to creating more equitable access to capital and knocking down these barriers? How do you all see your respective organizations in the future, post-COVID?
Sure, I'll start. One of the things we believe is that as we've all talked about, by aggregating more angel investors, which Houston needs, right, across the board, no matter what the ethnicity background is, we just need more angels pouring money into more entrepreneurs in the city. So we believe by adding more angels, specifically minority angels, we will be able to fund more businesses. And I think, as Juliana said, being able to partner with each other so that we can create a lot of entrepreneurs. Juliana mentioned the Women and Minority Task Force that the city of Houston started. I was on that task force. And the good news is Houston is #1 in the country for minority and women-owned businesses. The problem is those aren't innovation-related businesses, right? It's a great stat, right? But where Houston's going in the next 5 to 10 years, that number needs to be #1 for innovation for minority and women-owned businesses, right? So I think that for Urban Capital Network and for our nonprofit, the Innovation Center for Urban Entrepreneurship, we hope to be a part of that success by partnering with everybody here on the phone and seeing a lot more Black and Brown innovative-related entrepreneurs in the community.
And I would also say that I wouldn't go post-COVID, because right now there is a huge amount of minority business, small business, workforce development money that is at the city, state, and federal level, especially at the federal level right now. And again, it's like going back to what I said about setting priorities. It's up to us to make sure that that money is being earmarked for the next 3 to 5 years for our Black and Brown communities, for our underserved entrepreneurs and communities, so that they are becoming those minority small businesses that are focused on tech and innovation, because that also is going to be the future salvation of growing their businesses. And I think I've got 5 or 6. We at the ION have 5 or 6 grant applications out right now, specifically to drive funding around bringing resources over the next 3 years to minority businesses and minority entrepreneurs. They are the future of our economy, and we happen to be in a time right now where economic development is paramount. We need to make sure we're taking advantage of that for our Black and Brown and women communities.
So in terms of the mission for Portfolio, the big vision is to activate 1 million women into investing. And we are at around 2,000 so far. We really believe it because our model is pretty scalable. So we train and empower women that at their end train and empower other women into investing. So it's pretty big, but I think we're going to get there in the future. And for BAMA, for the Business Angel Minority Association, first of all, we want to become national. We're started in Houston because Houston is the most diverse city in the US, but Boston comes after that. We have a lot of contacts who want to create a BAMA in Boston, and one of our advisory board members is actually in Boston. Miami next, and we already have some people in Palo Alto who want to create the chapter. And we really want to become a sort of ACA for the investor community that are interested in diversity. And we want to also make sure that we don't stop in the US and become global, because there's a lot of Latin American funds that are interested in investing in Black and Brown founders in the US. There's a lot of connections there. Those connections can go both ways, because there's a lot of great tech that is much cheaper in Latin America that could find its way to the US and the other way around. So we're really trying to make sure we stay global and focus on that. And many of the diverse founders that I know in Houston have been more lucky by getting international investors than even local investors. So that's something we know very well, and we want to make sure we take advantage of.
So at DFH, we firmly believe that it is up to us to invest in the technology that's going to solve the problems in our community. And so long term, we really want to empower more entrepreneurs, and so that Houston is not only the most diverse city in the nation, but that we are the most, that we have the most entrepreneurs, minority entrepreneurs that are successful. And so we really want to be a convener of resources and really diversify the capital here in the city, because to Juliana, what you mentioned, a lot of entrepreneurs are having to go outside of the city to gain access to capital. And we have so much of it here. We just need to have an ideological shift so that our investors can start investing in different types of technology instead of what they've traditionally done here in the city of Houston. So again, I can't stress this enough. I think, and as we've all kind of alluded to, the partnerships are the biggest thing. I mean, we're all taking action. Heath, to what you said earlier, we're all, this is a great panel because we're all doing something, but let's make sure we're all doing something collectively. So I know, Heath, you and I have met several times. Juliana, you sit on our board. Preston sits on our board. And so I think it's really just going to take us working together. And so I see that as a part of Diversity Fund Houston's mission to not only empower and diversify capital in the minority community, but to really do it with all of you. So.
When I think about the question, what do I hope in 5 years that our respective organization will be known for, or what we'll be doing? I'll answer it with a statistic. Today, or last year in 2019, 47% of the investments we made 70 investments in companies last year, and 47% of them had a diverse member of the founding team or the executive team. I hope in 5 years that number exceeds 70. And I think if we do that, then we'll be known as a leader, not just in Texas and the Texas ecosystem, but in the nation. And it's going to require a lot more work, a lot more driving a lot more diverse partnerships and diverse mentors into our mentor network. But I'm excited about that. I'm excited about that challenge, and I think that's it's something I really look forward to. And we're measuring it every month, every single quarter. So that's the statistic I would love to see us accomplish.
Great. Thank you all so much. Okay, any last words? Well, first, are there any questions from the audience? And yes, there are. So let me let's not get to the last words yet. Okay. Let's see. There is a question. I saw one in the chat, so let me answer that one first. Have any of the panelists ever convened a group of startup founders and asked them to help develop programs and outreach initiatives that might directly benefit them?
We actually did that in our in the ION Smart Cities Accelerator, because it was a brand new accelerator, never been done before. And we actually did it on both sides. We went grassroots into the communities and asked them what problems they wanted to be solved and what smart technology could do for them in their lives, as opposed to us just giving them a bunch of sexy tech. And then we asked the founders, what's going to help you drive your company forward? What problems do you have? What barriers have you faced so far in your career? And how can this particular accelerator, with the goal that we had, which was to launch paid pilots for the city of Houston, what can we do to take those barriers out of the way? And I absolutely credit that early work to the success that the first cohort had at the end. Without their input, without them giving us that guidance and direction, we would never have been able to provide the support, the effective support that we did.
Right. Thank you, Duana, for that question. Did anybody else want to chime in?
In our case, what we did is partner with great associations like Houston Community College that have a lot of startup programs already dedicated to Black and Brown founders, or Baker Ripley, or the Urban League, to figure out how we can partner with them, and not only in terms of getting deal flow, but also making sure that after we educate our investors, we also educate our entrepreneurs to get investment ready. So the second stage after doing the Diversity Investor Academy is to make sure we have an entrepreneurship academy where all these key community entrepreneurs are getting investment ready. So that's how we've been doing it.
Okay, great. And I know we have a few minutes left, so I'm just quickly going to go through these questions. One question, do you see increased investing in ed tech as a trend with the emergence of distance education, especially on the college level? And that was from Mo Shabazz.
Yes.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah.
You know, there's a couple of different industries that have the opportunity to capitalize on this. I think ed tech, virtual learning, virtual anything, right? Ed tech, by virtue of that, to me, means some sort of virtual learning, or the ability to take it and engage in tech outside of a classroom, or tech or education that is scalable beyond just the classroom. And I think so we're driving partnerships with NRCC UA, ACT, NRCC UA, which is a big ed tech partner, one of the largest in the country. We're, putting, trying to put working hard to put our money where our mouth is and invest in more ed tech. But I think that, med tech, ed tech are two pretty obvious sectors right now that if you're well positioned, they'll get pretty noisy pretty quickly, because lots of people will find success. So how can you differentiate yourself and rise up above some of that noise? But many companies in the ed tech space are going to find a lot of success over the next year, 2, 3, 4, and beyond. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity. If you were an ed tech in December of 2019, you probably have a lot of opportunities to navigate, and so I think it's a pretty exciting sector.
Great. Okay, and last question. It appears investors are more inclined to fund tech companies compared to innovative ones. What are your thoughts? What are you all's thoughts on that? And that's from Kalia Guillory.
I would just say I don't know that it depends on the investor, right? A lot of investors, investment companies have focus areas and themes, but in general, I would say this environment is increasing. Quality entrepreneurs that may be listening, this environment is increasing the need and the requirement for everything about your offer and your company to be really solid and tight. So the bar is rising. I would say the bar is not being lowered, unfortunately. So for, as Tiffany was saying earlier, educating minority entrepreneurs, meeting them where they are, you've really got to dig deep. And for those of you that heard Mike's pitch from WinWin, I really liked his story in that he he developed the skill set and he knew how to code. So I would say most companies that are investing in tech or innovative companies, either one, they like entrepreneurs who either create the product on the engineering side or they design the product on the product side. Otherwise, that domain expertise isn't right. So in Mike's case, he has a tech platform, he learned how to code. And then the second thing he did was he went to work for a high growth company so he could get the playbook for free, right? He got the playbook on how to grow a tech company. He got it for free by going to work for one first. And then he did all of his research, customer discovery, validated the industry, validated with customers, and then he launched the company. I think that kind of pathway is 10 times more important in the current environment and over the next 3 to 5 years for entrepreneurs. And I would encourage them to follow up with Mike or reach out to people that subscribe to people like Bryan or myself and some of the others on the call to really understand that playbook and not just go out there alone, because you got a lot of energy and a lot of passion and have a really good idea, right? The bar has raised and you really need that infrastructure around you and that support system around your experiences.
And I would add to that sometimes when people say they've got an innovative idea, they forget that basic question that every investor is going to ask them, which is, are you actually solving a problem that somebody's willing to pay you money for? And it's not about whether it's tech enabled or not tech enabled. And it's, when Mike was talking, are you in love with your idea or are you about winning? And you're only going to win if the thing that you're innovating around is something that somebody wants to buy. And it's as simple as that. And I think that's, to Heath's point, that's only heightened today. It was important yesterday. It's really important today.
Yeah, I love Heath's point. And it took me back, reflecting back, my first job out of college was working for somebody else's tech company. And I was able, that was such a pivotal moment for me to understand what actually happens in a small company and how does a company navigate some of this stuff. I had full transparency. I wasn't a founder, but I had full transparency to everything. And that was so valuable that I think that that was such a helpful experience. But there's two types of innovation that exist today. There's technology innovation and there's business model innovation. And business model innovation reminds me a lot of the last company that I started, which didn't invent anything crazy. We just applied it in a new way to a pretty antiquated industry and grabbed a lot of grabbed quick market share and showed a lot of growth real quickly. And that was really appetizing to investors. And so I think the first thing you can really do, the nature of this question is surround yourself with investors and go seek advice and opinions, expert advice and opinions. And they'll probably be pretty candid to tell you whether or not you should be pursuing private investment capital. I think more people probably set out on this path than, and it's not the right path for everybody and every business model and every tech innovation. And I think that that's really the first place to start is to just familiarize yourself with what does a VC look for. If you're going to go raise angel money, it really means that you're going to have to follow that with VC money. 9 out of 10 times, if not more. And so you should really be thinking about the future of that business and is it even suitable in the first place? If you're not trying to disrupt a multi-billion-dollar market and you're not the team that can explain why you're going to go grab that, then angel investors and VC probably isn't the right path. And there's lots of other paths to explore, SBA loans and other types of grant funding and so forth. And I think it's just the nature of that question, what's the right path? And I think everybody wants to, a lot of time, default to going to raise money from their network or from VCs, but it's usually not the right path a lot of times. And I think it's an important distinction up front that people can make as well. So, we put on a lot of workshops and I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime and have a candid conversation about that as well.
Right. And if you want to drop contact information, please put that in the chat. But I want to respect everyone's time. And last, just 30 seconds or less, favorite food and any last words that you have, any recommendation, call to actions that you have for our audience here. Favorite food first.
All right, I'm gonna jump in and say it's gotta be coming off my smoker. So as long as I'm smoking it, it's good. You know, my last word I'd want to say is my favorite thing that I've done this year is develop the partnership at the ION with DivInc. And I got to say a huge thank you again. And I am so excited for the city of Houston to make Preston be here on an even more regular basis. And thank you for everything you're doing here on the ground here, Joy. It's this is great for Houston, and we can have more and more panels like this. I'm excited.
So favorite food, I'm between a good paella and anything Mexican spicy. And in terms of last words, I have to say that this pandemic is widening the gap in terms of gender and minority. So we are even more relevant than before. And we need to be role models to inspire people into action. It's our responsibility more than ever to make sure we activate more investors, that we contact more, we go find more Black and brown entrepreneurs to help them out, because this is bad for us, and we need to make sure we're part of the solution.
I think favorite food is pizza. First, I like free pizza, then hot pizza, and then I really don't care what kind it is. So last words, I echo Gaby. Happy to see DivInc here. Preston, brothers, great to see you coming. We talked about this 5 years ago when you did your first cohort, and I'm really glad to see it finally happen. So awesome you're going to be here and get to spend some more time with you.
Looking forward to it.
I'm on Team Heath. I'm a total pizza monster, and it doesn't matter what kind, but I could eat pizza all day, every day. My last words of advice to everybody that's viewing today is to show up, get involved. That's the hard part, but we know it. There's no replacement for showing up to the webinar or showing up to the physical event. That is absolutely the most important thing to do. So continue to do it. Thank you for being here. To the panelists, continue to show up. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Tiffany, where are you?
I'm right here. So my favorite food is tortilla chips. Anybody that knows me knows I will kill a bag in one sitting. And then last words of advice for the attendees is really just to educate yourself, surround yourself with people doing the work like the panelists here. Take advantage of opportunities that are out there. So small business programs that are doing things in the community, like ones that we've all mentioned. DivInc, of course, apply for that program if you're at that stage. But I mean, you really just got to be prepared. And there's a lot of resources out there and a lot of people doing great work. So make sure that you're attending events like this where you are getting that education, and then you're following up. And so that would be my biggest thing. And then again, for us as panelists, just making sure that our respective organizations are continuing to do the work together so that we can really make some equitable change in our community. So I'm excited to keep moving forward and see what we can do together.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate this panel, pushing those hard questions, you know, and having those hard conversations about the startup ecosystem. So I appreciate everyone here. And of course, Preston, I'm not going to forget about you. We need to know your favorite food and last words.
Well, I'm just gonna skip the pizza and the chips. I'm a steak, macaroni and cheese, collard greens individual. So serve me up. That's me. You can get me all day, every day. And so thank you, Joy. Thank you to the panelists. All of the panelists I consider dear friends and dear partners. You've heard we've already got a partnership established with the ION. Super excited about that. And working part of the Diversity Fund with Tiffany and that entire team. with Philip and the entire team. So I'm really, really excited about that. And then also, we've been working with Capital Factory for probably 3, 4, probably 5 years now, actually. And we have a partnership, a formal partnership in place that we're going to push forward from 2020 all the way through. That's going to be, Austin, Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio. So we're super excited about that. The one thing that I do want to leave everybody with, I mean, there was a lot of information shared, meeting entrepreneurs where they are, people showing up, getting the education and the experience. Part of what DivInc is trying to do is, we know we're not the end all be all, but we provide the culture. We bring people together. We bring people to education. We serve as mentors. We have our accelerator program. So we welcome you to come into our environment. And, if you're looking for a place, we welcome you to be that starting point. And we leverage our partnerships and our relationships in the community to allow you to work your way through the path, through the entrepreneurship journey. And Bryan, alluded to the fact of, getting that candid feedback, right? Getting that guidance. We want to help you in that process, and we'll leverage our partners again to help you in that process. So come and participate. Come and get your startup idea off the ground. Come and be part of an environment that's thriving and growing, not just in Austin, but in Houston, Dallas. Let's go. All right, that's what I'm saying. Let's go. And we're going to continue to build these partnerships in the community. I personally think we have the right formula, right, between all these partnerships and this collaboration, moving the needle. We started DivInc 4 years ago because we were tired of talking. And Gaby said this earlier, right? We're tired of talking. We're going to move. And Heath mentioned this as well. Everybody on this panel, Mike T. Brown to the world, we're about action. We're about moving. And so, again, we welcome you to come. We welcome you to be part of the DivInc family. We welcome you to be part of family members of all of our partners here tonight. Thank you all for joining us. And I will let you know that we do have another event coming up that we will love to have our women of color join us on May 14th. Be on the lookout for that. It's called Startup Sisters. And it's focused on women of color. All women are invited to that, but our primary focus is women of color. And we're going to have a outstanding panel and fireside chat happening at that one as well. So again, thank you all for being part of this evening and joining us. And have a great evening. Enjoy.
Thank you, Preston.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gaby. Thanks, Bryan. Thanks, Heath, Tiffany, Juliana. Thank you.